Hello. Hi, can you hear me? Hello, can you see me? If you can hear me, just type yes in the chat. Is the audio clear? Can you tell me if the audio is clear and if you can hear me clearly? Let's wait for a couple of minutes and then we can start with the session. Uh, so I can see there are only three people yet. Uh, there were a lot of people yesterday. So I am hoping that a lot of people will turn up today as well, and we will have a good session today as well, because today's agenda is learning about functional components and also learning about the useState hooks. So I hope you are all excited, because I am way too excited to do this thing. Uh, yeah. Okay. 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 Cool. So I think. So if you have any questions, you can put in the chat. Um, Hi GS Connor. Hi Bhuvaneshwaran, if I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, so I think we should get started by now. It's almost uh, okay. GS Connor says he's very excited. So am I. I'm also very excited to do this live, and I'm expecting that you would learn something from out of this live. So yeah, without wasting much more time, let's get started. So yeah, good evening, Saqib. Good to see you again. I remember you from the previous live. Great to see you again. Okay, cool. So let's get started uh, in that case. Then we've already 4 minutes down the line. So what is today's agenda? As I told, we'll be learning functional components. We'll learn what are props, and we'll also see use state as well. Now you might be wondering, when will I teach rendering the list or conditional rendering. All of these things I'll teach when we start with use state. So it's used there only. So that's why I thought it's better to teach it along with use state only, not creating unnecessary confusion. So let's get started. So let's use a code sandbox. So I'll create a new code sandbox over here. I don't want to import. Click on this, and I can click on create a new code sandbox. Uh, right, it's loading now. Okay, cool. So what I'll do is, first I'll get rid of all of these things. Right. What I want to do is, I want to create a functional component. What is a functional component? Let's say I have a button. Okay, I have a button over here, and I want to say that, let's say I want to create multiple buttons. Okay, let's say one button is used to add a number, and then let's say there's another button over here which basically is used to subtract two numbers, correct? And then let's say there is another button which is basically used to, let's say, multiply numbers. So I'll just write multiply, or you can also write product as well. Okay, so I have three buttons. Let's have another button which would be my last button, which is basically used to divide two numbers. So I'll just write divide over here. Okay, right now I do not have any mathematical numbers, but I've just taken four different numbers over here. So there is add, subtract, four different buttons: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Now, if you see over here, I have created four different buttons, and with all the different buttons, it just, the only thing that is changing is just changing the name, right? It's just changing the name. Now what I can do is, I can make this button a component. I can make this button a component. Now what actually is a component? Okay, so let me show you my this project again, which I had shown in the previous class as well. This video library that I have made with React.js. So over here, if you see what are all components. So this header basically is one component. Then there is a sidebar which is again a component. Then basically there are these categories which is a component, and then there are these card which is again a component. So these are all components. So this header is a component, this sidebar is a component. These, when I click on these are buttons and these are components, and this one card is also a component. So these are actually called as component: a header component, a sidebar component, and then a card and the button component. So what I can do is, with React I can create one component, and out of that one component I can create multiple components. So what I can do over here is, actually I can just write, okay, I can, now how do we create a component? So to create a component, it's very simple. You just have to create a function. So you write function, and the name of the component would be a button. So okay, so I'll just write a button over here, which is the name of the component. Now you have to always remember that name of component will always start with capital letters. Name of component cannot start with lowercase letters, because this is how React will understand that it's a component. When you write it as a capital letter, then only React understands that, okay, this is actually a component. So the name of a component should always start with a capital letter. Okay, and then what I have to do is, in a component I have to return something. Okay, in a component what I have to do, I have to return something. So over here I'll just write return. Okay, and then what I have to return, I have to return a button. So I'll open the brackets and just write return HTML, a button. Okay, and then I'll close the button over here. So what I have to do is, over here when I return the button, I can write something like, let's say I can write add button, something like this. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I didn't expect that to come, but someone was ringing the doorbell again and again. That would have caused a disturbance, so that's why I had to go. Okay, so where were we? So basically we were here where what I've done actually is, let's understand it again. So in order to create a component, you have to create a function, because component is nothing but a function itself. So the name of the component would always start with a capital letter, right? And since I want to create a button component, I'll just write button over here. And then when I have to return an HTML, so a function, basically a component is nothing but a function which returns HTML. Okay, a component is nothing but a function which returns HTML. So I'll just write return over here, return, and in the brackets, or I can just write return. What I want to do, I want to return button, right? And let's say this would be an add button. Okay, I'll just write add over here. Now what I can do over here is, I can remove all of these things and I can call this function, or okay, I can call the component. So how do I basically call the component? I write the name of the component, right, in a tag. And as I told you yesterday also, if a tag is not a closing tag, you have to add this /. So if I do this, if you can see over here, a button is actually created over here. Okay, great. Now what I can do is, I can call this n number of times, right? I can call this n number of times, and I can call it again and again also. So since I'm calling it again and again, if you see, there are multiple add buttons basically being created. Okay, since I'm calling it again and again, multiple add buttons are created. Now, but I do not want only add, right? I want subtract, add, subtract, multiply as well. And I also want divide also, because I wanted 4 buttons. So let me add 4 buttons over here. Now how will we do it? So this is one part where you basically create a component. So creating component is as simple as this. Okay, if you want to create an input also, what you can do is, you can write function, and then you can write input, and then you can write over here return an input tag. I want to return an input tag. So this is a input component. Now wherever you want, you just call it, right? You just call the input component. Put a backslash forward slash over here. You get an input component also, right? So see, this is something which is very unusual, and this is what we were talking in the yesterday session also, where a function is nothing but a component is nothing but a JavaScript function which actually returns basically a markup, and this is also called as JSX, where you create a JavaScript function and you return an HTML, or inside an HTML you write JavaScript. Okay, but since you do not want in any input, I'll just remove the input, but I'll keep the component now, or let's remove the component also. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do over here is, now I do not want this single this word to be here, right? I do not want add to be here. When every button is created, I want this button component to change the name of this text. Okay, to change the text or change the content which is there over here. Okay, whenever a component is created, I want it to be change the text. So what can I do is, I can use something called as props, right? I can use something called as props. Now how do I pass props? So props, you can understand in this way, is nothing but like parameter and argument, right? Basically a function, whenever in JavaScript we declare a function takes a parameter. When we call the function, we basically pass in some argument. Okay, when we call the function, we actually pass in some argument. So over here also, this basically you can understand that I'm calling this function over here, right? Or basically I'm calling the component over here, and I have to pass a value to this functional component. Okay, I have to pass value to this function. So how will I do it? Okay, I want some content to be added, or I want the text over here, right? Instead, I want the text add, subtract, multiply. So what I can do is I can write text is equal to, and then in inverted commas I can write add. Okay, text is equal to add, and then what I can do over here is, now this function basically receives something called as prop. Okay, to receive something called as a prop. Okay, now this prop internally is nothing but an object. Okay, this prop is internally nothing but an object. Now, let me show you why is it an object. So if I do console.log the props, okay, if I do console.log props, it will give me an object. Okay, and let me pass all the text. So that text equals to let's say subtract. Okay, and then let's say over here text is equal to, let's say, multiply, right? There is subtract and then there is multiply, and let's say there is this text is equal to, which basically is going to be divide. Okay, if I save it now, let me refresh this. Still, see, the button is still add over here. Okay, but we're not interested in that. We're interested in what is the props value. So if I see over here, see, the props value is add, subtract and divide. So basically it's an object. See, if I do the props is nothing but an object which has a property text and its value is add. Okay, so if you're using Code Sandbox for the first time, do not worry. Code Sandbox does this thing. It basically gives you whenever you do console log, it sometimes gives you the output 2 times. Okay, even if let's say if I refresh it, still I'm getting it twice only. I'm not with only one component. It's not that it's being called twice, it is called only once only, but in development, Code Sandbox does this thing. Okay, but now we know that props is basically an object, right, with the property text, and we want the value. So I can over here do props.text also. So if I do props.text, I will only get add, subtract, divide and multiply, right? Where is this coming from? It is coming from here, right? So when I call the function, so this basically is nothing but my prop, right? This is my prop, and the function will receive it in the form of an object. So what I can do is, instead of this text over here, and clear this text, and in curly braces I can just write props dot text, correct? And then if I save it, now if you see, I get add, subtract, multiply and divide. Amazing, right? So over here if you see, I have not written the code to create button 4 times. The way we did it earlier, I have not written button and then add and then button, subtract, then button. What I have done is, whenever you know that something is basically going to be repeated n number of times, or let's say it's going to be repeated 4-5 times in the React code, you basically make a function out of it, or you make a component out of it. To be more precise, you make a functional component out of it. Now I knew that I wanted 4 different buttons, right? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. So instead of writing it again and again, what I did is I created a functional component called button over here, and wherever I want this button, I'll just call the component or initialize the component in this way, and whatever values I want to pass, I can pass it using this way. Correct? So this is how basically this is what props actually is. Now this is actually a very simpler way to tell you what props is, but there are a lot to props because we can pass multiple values as well. Like we can pass multiple values to the props. Like when I say multiple values, what do I mean by that? Let's say I'll write value is equal to, or let's say ID. I'll give every button an ID. So I'll write ID is equal to, let's say 1, and in the same way I will give the subtract button also an ID. So I'll copy this and I'll write ID, this would be equal to 2, and I'll write ID over here, ID is equal to, let's say 3, and then let's say this would be ID is equal to, let's say 4. Okay, now I am passing these IDs also over here. So if I again do console log the props, now if you see, the props will be updated. See, if I refresh it, now the props has 2 values, right? The props has 2 properties. It's the text and the ID. Text and the ID. So what I can do over here is, in the button I can also write add, and let's say if I want to put the ID also, so I can write add colon, and then I can just write ID dash in the curly braces I can write props dot ID. Okay, so if you see over here, it is add ID 1, subtract, and the button ID is 2. Or if I, instead of ID, if I want to write button ID, so I can write button ID also. Generally we do not write all of these things, but I'm just showing you the possibilities of what all you can do. Like you can pass multiple values. Okay, so these we don't call them as values, we say them props. So we are passing props, and then in the functional component we see props in this way. We write props, and then these basically become a property of this object prop. So this props is nothing but an object. So these basically become a property of this object prop. So in order to access it, we can write props.text and props.id the way you do it with the normal object. Okay, so this is what functional component is, and this is what basically props are. Now with props you can not only pass these strings, you can pass numbers, you can pass objects, you can pass arrays, you can also pass functions also, right? Let's see how we can pass function also. So what I want is when I click on the function, okay, when I click on the function, I want to basically, let's say, display different I want to display add, subtract, multiply, something like that. How can we do that? Now this basically can be little difficult, or yeah, so yeah, we can't do that by this regularly writing on click. So what I can do over here is I can just write on click, and then, or I can create a function over here. Okay, let me create a function over here, and I can write function, and this would be, let's say, click handler. So basically I can define a function inside functional component also, and I can just do console.log whatever is the prop value that I'm getting. So I just write props.text. Okay, so if I click on the add button, it would call this props.text. So what I have to do is, over here I can write button, I can write on click. Can I do this thing? On click is equal to click handler. What do you think? Will this work? Okay, will this work? If I save it, okay, if I save it, let me just remove the props from here. Okay, so what I've done is, if I click on any button, okay, I've removed the props. Okay, let me clear this also. So if I click on a button, if I click on add, it should give me add. So if I click, it gives add. If I click on subtract, it gives subtract. Click on multiply, it gives multiply. If I click on divide, it gives divide. So what I've done is, it's very simple. When I click on any button, so over here, if you see, there is one button and applied a click handler over here. And if I click on the button, okay, I want it's basically text value. So this basically is creating the add button. So when I click on this add button, okay, when I click on this add button, so whatever is the text, I wanted to log that text, and these text will be added as a property in this props, right? This text will be added as a property in this props. So whatever is in the text, I want it to be consoled. So in the same way, it would happen for our button also, and the same thing also. If you want to also console the ID, so you can just write props.id, right? So I'll write ID, I get ID also. So now let me clear the output. If I click over here, I should get add 1, subtract, and the ID is 2, and the ID is 3, and the ID is 4. So this is basically how you can actually create a functional component and actually pass some props over to the functional component. Okay, great. I hope you have understood this thing. Now let's build some interesting things. So let's go on to what hooks are. Now basically what I want to do is, let me remove all of these components, or let me remove all of these things. So or let me create a new code sandbox for now. Okay. So I'll keep this thing. Maybe we can come back to it to get comparison or understanding, something like that. Okay. So our agenda is to understand useState hook. Now why do we use useState? So basically useState is used to, what we say is used to manage the state. Now what actually is managing the state? So let's say what I want to do is when I click on the button, I want to increase the value basically of, I want to increase the value. So let's try to do it with this thing. So let me okay, let's create a button over here. So let's create a button. I'll just create a button and I could just write increment, okay, backslash button, okay, and let me have one more button backslash, let's say decrement backslash button, okay. And what I want to do is, I want to, let's say, create a global value. I just said let count is equal to 0, and what I want is, when I click the button, the value of count should increase. When I click on decrement, the value of count should decrease, okay. So what I can do is, I can create two function increment handler, right, increment handler, and I can just write, you just have to do count plus plus, okay, and I can also create another function which would be decrement handler. So decrement handler, okay, the H should be capital, decrement handler, and this again should reduce the count value, okay, should decrease the count value. And what I want is I want the count to be displayed over here. So I'll use a paragraph tag, and in the JSX I'll write count to be displayed over here, and then backslash the P. Okay. So if you see, initially the count is 0. When I click on the handler, I have to increase the count. So now if I click on anything, nothing is going to happen, right? Because I have not used the event handler. So over here I have to write on click is equal to, and I have to refer the function, right? If you remember from the previous class, we refer the function, otherwise it will go into infinite re-rendering. It will keep on calling the same function again and again, right? So, and over here again I can write on click is equal to, let's say this would be decrement handler. So now when I click over here, so if you see, nothing is happening, like even if it's okay, let me console log the value of count over here, and let me also console log the value of count over here, okay, and we'll try to identify why is it not working, okay, we'll try to do this, why is it not working, and then we'll see the solution also. So if I click on the increment handler, it gives me, see the value is increasing, right? In the function the count is increasing, but in the paragraph I can't see it, right? If I click on decrement also, it's increasing, it's decreasing, right, going to negative, but in the website or in the DOM I can't see it, right? It's not changing, right? It's the 0 is still 0, the 0 is still 0. Why this is not happening? Okay, why is this the case? This is a problem, right? We have to understand this thing. See, making project is not that difficult. You learn something, you can make project, but understanding these things is also very, very important, okay. Now this is not happening, this is not changing, because this page or this website is not being re-rendered again, okay. What is the meaning of re-rendering? You basically create the DOM again, right? In JavaScript we have the DOM tree, right? So you basically create the DOM tree again with the change value. Over here, what should have happened? Since this count is changing, this paragraph tag should have been re-rendered again, right? We have to re-render it, because if you don't re-render it, then it won't show the new value on the website, right? The way we refresh something, okay, whenever we want to see something, if we click on refresh, we get the new value. Like even now this, let's say, let's try to refresh it. What we get now? If I click on refresh, okay, it is still 0. If I click on increment 4, if I click on refresh, okay. So I'm not talking about this refresh as a re-render. What I'm talking is when I click on the button, the value should have changed over here, but it's not changing. It's not changing because it's not getting re-rendered. The DOM is not changing. That is basically where state management comes into picture. So what I'm doing is, what we are going to do is, I'm going to write import useState. So in this curly braces, I'll write import useState from where? From React. Okay. So basically React is this package from where I get all the hooks. So useState is basically nothing but a hook which is actually used to manage the state of the application. Now, what is the current state? The current state is that the value of count should have been changed, right? The more I click on increment, the more I click on decrement, the value of count should have changed, but it's not changing. So how do I do it? What I'll do is, I'll first have to remove this global count from here. I'll remove this count and this console from here also. And what I'm going to do is, inside the app component, okay, let me remove this count from, let me comment this, okay. Inside this app component, okay, so I have to use useState inside a component only. I cannot use useState outside a component. So I'll write let, okay, so useState basically when I have to basically, okay, or even if I write if I call the useState function, so the useState function basically returns 2 value. It gives me 2 value, okay, and it basically gives an array of 2 values. So since I want both the values, I can do destructuring. So I'll write let. So the first value would be the initial value. The second value would be the setter function. So I'll write set count. Okay, let me take a moment to clear this out. So what does useState do? So useState basically is a hook. So if I hover over useState, if you can read over here, it's basically, if you see, it's an array over here, right? Can you see? Okay, it went somewhere. If you see, it's an array over here. Okay, it's going again and again. So the first is undefined, okay, and then the first is undefined, and then it says react.dispatch and previous state, okay, and the first is undefined, and the second one, if you see, is basically a callback function. If you are familiar with what arrow functions are, it's a callback function. So basically useState gives me 2 values. It gives me the initial value of the state or initial state, and it gives me a setter function which will set the initial value, right, to the new value, or it will set the previous value to the new value. So this is by convention how we write. Let's say you are basically getting a message, you'll write let message, or you'll use an array, you'll write message, and then you can write set message. Okay, set message is equal to useState. Okay, is equal to useState, and then you can also pass a value also over here. You can write hello, right? And what I can do over here is I can use a paragraph tag. Let's see the beauty. Okay, I'll use a paragraph tag, and okay, come on, where is the cursor? Okay, I'll use a paragraph tag, and then over here I can just write the message. If I just write the message, see it over here. Amazing, right? If you see, hello is coming over here, right? If you see, hello is coming over here. Where is hello coming from? This hello basically is being assigned to this set message as its value, right? So this hello becomes as I told you, this variable is the initial value. Okay, it holds the initial value. So this hello is the initial value. So when useState, you can pass the initial value. This becomes message equals to hello. And by using this set message, I can change the value also. Okay. Now instead of hello, if I write hello geeks, okay, if I write hello geeks, so I'll get hello geeks over here. Okay. Now let me remove this thing. So it's by convention, write it in this way. And instead of message, what should I write? I should write count over here. So if I write count, okay, I get count to be 0 over here. Okay. Now I'm not getting count 0 because I'm not specified it. So in the useState hook, I can write 0 over here. So I'll get count 0. Now what I can do is, when I click on the button, I want to change the value of this count, right? I want to update it. So what I can do is, when the button is clicked, I can use this setter function, right? Set count, and in the bracket, since it uses a callback function, I can take the previous value, which is count, and then write count plus 1. Okay, take the previous value, which is count, and write count plus 1. So if I save it now, just see the magic. If I click on increment, amazing, right? The value is changing in real time. So what happens is, with useState, whenever this state is changed, the app is re-rendered. Okay, re-render does not mean refresh. Refresh basically is creating the entire DOM again. Re-render, basically in re-render what happens is, React will check what element is changing, and whatever element is changing, it will re-render that element again. Like, it will draw that element again, only that element. So with React, there is something called as virtual DOM. Okay, in JavaScript there is a normal DOM, in React there is a virtual DOM. What happens in React DOM is, it does not recreate the entire tree again, but it only creates the value that is changing, or the element that is changing. So in our case, only this p tag is going to change again and again, right? Since this p tag is going to change again and again, the React's virtual DOM will only re-render this element. It won't re-render the entire thing. So the advantage of this is that, if you do not re-render the entire tree again, the optimization or the performance increases, right? Your website automatically becomes more faster. If you are again rendering the same tree again, now since there are only 3 elements, it's not a big issue. If there are, let's say, 100 elements, and you have to again re-render the entire 100 elements, then it becomes more slower. But out of the 100, if you just want to re-render only 10 elements or 5 elements, then it becomes more faster, right? So that is what React does. It re-renders only that element which has changed. So in our case, this component P is changing, so it will re-render only this element, right? The same is for decrement function. Okay, what you can do is set count, and then count, since this is a callback function, I'll just write count minus 1. Okay, if I save it now, so if I do decrement, the value is decrement. If I do increment, the value is increasing also. Amazing, right? So it's being re-rendered, okay, not refresh. There's a difference between re-render and refresh. So let me explain this again to you. So what we have done is, we have created a useState. It's used for state management, right? We saw an example in the previous with the previous example, where we are trying to increment and decrement. It is not changing because this was not getting re-rendered again, right? This was not getting re-rendered in the previous example. Okay, now in order to re-render this, what I have to do is, I have to use useState, right? I have not only useState, I have to use the hooks. So one of the hooks is the useState hooks, and we'll see other hooks also. So what does useState hook do is, whenever this state is changed, right? So this is the state value, the count. Whenever the state value changes, it will re-render only that element. It will re-render only that element with the new state value, right? So now if I refresh it, it will again become 0. Okay, it becomes 0 because it re-renders the whole app. Now when I click on the button, so it will re-render only this element with the new value of the state, right? What is the new value of the state? It is 3. Okay, it is 3. Why? Because when I'm increasing the value over here when I click on the button. So when I click on the button, I'm calling this increment handler, and what is it doing? It is setting the state value to the new value. Okay, so to explain it once again, we imported useState from React. This is the way you do it. And then what I did is, I basically wrote let count and set count equals to useState. Why did I do this? Because useState, when I call this useState hook, useState basically will return me 2 values. One which will be the initial value, and one is a setter function which is used to set this initial value to a new value. Okay, one is the initial value, other is a setter function which is used to set this value to a new value. And how do I do it? I can just call the set count function. Okay, great. Did you understand this thing? Any doubt, any questions? Okay, great. Now the problem with this is, that, let's say if I try to set the count value directly over here, if I just write count, and then if I write count plus, let's say 1, or count plus, let's say 2. So when I try to do this thing, you will always get this error which says too many re-renders, and it says React limits the number of renders to prevent an infinite loop. What is happening? So this basically is like, okay, so when I write it in this way, so what is happening, since I'm using the setter function, the setter function will basically set the count value to a new value, correct? This is what setter function always does, right? This is the initial value, this is the setter function. Setter function will set the count value to a new value every time. So what will happen, since the new value is set every time, this element will be re-rendered again, right? And this element is re-rendering, and then we are also changing this value parallelly. So what is happening is, we are actually changing this value when this element is re-rendered. Okay, we are changing the initial value of count when this element is re-rendered. And when you try to change the value of a state, or if you try to change the state value when an element is re-rendered, it leads to too many re-renders, right? Wow, because what you are doing is basically you are re-rendering this element and you are also changing the value. So whenever you try to change the state value, what is the state value? This count is the state value. When you try to change the state value on a re-render, it will give you too many re-renders. And another very simpler way to understand is that, since this is going to keep on changing the value, this is also going to be changed continuously. So it's an endless process, and it goes into an infinite loop, right? Just like a while loop. If you write, okay, in the while loop, okay, let me take an example from JavaScript. Let's say if I write let I equals to 0, okay, if I write let I equals to 0, and if I write while I is less than 10, okay, while I is less than 10, you just do, let's say, console log, okay, you do console.log the value of I. So now what will happen, if I do not increase the value of I, this will enter into an infinite loop, right? Correct? Because the value of I will forever be less than 10, because I is 0. So this enters an infinite loop, right? So that is also happening over here also. I'm continuously increasing, and in the same way, whenever as what did I say? Whenever the state value changes, this element is re-rendered again. Whenever the state value changes, this element is re-rendered again. So the state value is continuously changing, so it is continuously being re-rendered, and it enters into an infinite loop because it is continuously changing over here, and that's why it gives you too many re-renders. So you have to make sure that whenever you try to change a state value, it should always be in a function, or it should always be conditional, like if some condition happens. Now what are we doing in our case over here is, okay, in our case, only when the button is clicked, then only I am changing the state value, right? And if you see, I'm not calling the function over here, right? The moment I call the function over here, okay, see, if I call the function, again it gives me too many re-renders, because I've created the button and I'm calling the function again and again, again and again. Now when I keep on calling the function, it will keep on increasing the value of count. If it keeps on increasing the value of count, this element will be re-rendered again, and it goes into an infinite loop, right? So we have to remove this thing over here, and we have to just give a reference over here. Okay, great. So this is a very basic example of useState, where you basically create an increment and decrement over here. Okay, cool. Now what you can also do over here is, you can also create some conditions also, right? Now what condition you can do over here is, let's say you want to call the decrement function, okay, the value of this count should not go beyond 0, okay. So I can increment it, and when I decrement it, the moment it is 0, it should not call the count function. So what can I do over here is, I can write over here, when the value of count is greater than or equal to 0, okay, then only call the increment function. So for then I can use the ampersand. So this basically, I'm creating a condition which says, when the count value is only greater than or equal to 0, then only you call the decrement function. Okay, so and basically means you then only call the decrement function, right? Since I do not have any else, I have to use this and only. So if I save it, I can click on increment, it's incrementing. Can click on decrement, it's decremented. But okay, now okay, some error happened. Error occurred. It says on click listener to be a function, and instead got a false value. Okay, so I think we can't do this over here. Can we do it over here? No, we can't do it, right? So let us do this again. So it can click on increment, right? If I click on decrement, now if I click on decrement, it becomes 0. If I click on decrement again, it becomes -1. But if I click on decrement again, so then it's not working. Okay, so what can we do over here is, we can actually try to make this a callback function by using an arrow function. Let's see if this works. Okay, so if I save it, let me refresh it. If this works, good enough. If it does not work, then we'll try another solution. Okay, let's try to experiment and let's try to play around. Okay, use this session in order to play around with your code. If I click on decrement, nothing is happening. Okay, if I click on decrement, nothing is happening. If I click on increment, it's working, but the decrement is not working in this case scenario. Okay, so what we can do is, so the other way we can do is I can remove it from here, and then I can put it over here. Okay, but if I put it over here, then also it gives me an error. Okay, which says unexpected token. Okay, so this is not also correct way. So see, I'm actually showing you all the wrong ways to write the code. So don't repeat these mistakes and don't get stuck in all of these things. So what I can do is I can remove it from here, right? I can just call the decrement function, and in the decrement function, what I can do is, when the value of count is or when the value of count over here is till the time it is greater than 0, then only I can call this function. So I can write if the value of count is greater than 0, then only you call this function, otherwise you do not call this function. Okay, so I will put this in the condition. So this also can be done, right? So if I save it, now if I click on increment, it's incrementing the value. Okay, amazing. If I click on decrement, it's also decrementing the value, right? It's working. Why? Because over here it says if the value of count is greater than 0, then only you call this thing. So if I decrement it again, right? Now the moment I reach 1, okay, I'm clicking decrement again, it becomes 0. If I click on decrement again, it's not calling it. Amazing, right? So what I've done? I've done a very simple thing. What I've done is I've put a condition over here. So it was not working over here. Okay. So what I've done is I've just added over here. So if count is greater than 0, then only basically call this function. Okay. Okay. Now, so the value is only going to increase. If I click on decrement, it's only going to go to 0. So this is how useState basically works under the hood. Okay. Amazing. Now, instead of using only a single number, I can use arrays over here. I can also use objects also over here. So let's say an example where we can okay, instead of basically you going directly to the arrays, let's say an example of input also. Okay, so I'll keep the button over here only. What we are going to do is we'll see how we can store the input value also into a useState. Okay, so let me open this React code sandbox over here now. Are you all enjoying the session? We have very few people today. The maximum I saw was only 10-11 people. But are you all enjoying the session? Are you all having a good time? That is what is very important. Okay, so what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to create an input. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a placeholder over here, or placeholder which says right here or something like this, right here, something like this. Okay, let me clear this for now. Let me wrap this in the inverted quotes. Okay, now what I want is whatever I am writing over here, I want it to be displayed on the screen. Yesterday what we did is whatever we were writing, we were displaying it on the console, right? Yesterday we did that thing. But now what I want is when I write something over here, I want that thing actually to be shown on the screen only. So what I can do is, for this also I have to use useState, because what I'm doing, I am changing something on the website, like I'm changing something on the DOM, right? So in order to change the DOM, you have to use hooks. Okay, and the easiest hook that we know now is useState. So you have to remember it in this way, right? When you want to change something on the DOM, right? Like you're typing something on the website and you want that results to be shown on the screen, or when you click on the button, you have to go somewhere. That means you are changing something on the DOM, right? You're creating a DOM or you're removing a DOM. For that, you have to use hooks, and you can use useState for that. Okay, and useState is used for state management, and all the other hooks also that we are going to see, like even we are going to see use reducer, that also uses useState under the hood. Okay, so what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to import the state, so that use state use state from React. Okay, use state from React. What I'm going to do is I am going to just write over here, instead of let, I'll use const now, const text, and then I can just write set the text, okay, is equal to use state, and this would be an empty string. If I do not set it as an empty string, that will basically give me a null value. Okay, it basically becomes null if I do not set it as an empty string. So I'll set it as an empty string. I can keep it null also, does not matter. Now with the input, what I can do is, with input there is no on click, with input there is on change or on key press. These are the events. So I can write on change. You call this function which is handle change. Okay, you call this function which is handle change, and it says handle change is not defined. Okay, we'll define it. We'll write function handle change, and then I can write over here what I want is whatever is here, the e.target.value. If you remember from the previous session we did, so whenever I use the on change and refer the function will always get an event over here. So I can write event over here, even though I'm not passing. Okay, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, the event is not being passed, but whenever I create a reference, it actually passes. So whenever I write something over here, on change, it will refer this function. With the reference, it always gives the event also. Okay, so with the event is nothing but event or target basically is nothing but the element itself. What I can do is I can basically create a variable called as let input is equal to or let input value is equal to event dot target dot value. Like input value is event dot target dot value, and I can use set text to set that value, and then write input value over here. Okay, so it's not necessary that you have to add a callback. So I use a callback in this example because the value was increasing, right? For that reason I use a callback. Okay, you can do it without callback also, but callback is a good thing. You take the previous value and then you add 1 to the previous value. Over here there is no previous value or new value. I just have to set the text to the event.target.value, like whatever is there in this text over here. So then what I can do over here is I can since I got it, so what I can do is I can create a paragraph tag and just write the text over here, \p. So whatever I'm going to write now is going to come over here. So if I write hello, my name is Prakash. Okay, amazing, right? And I am a mentor, okay, or a web developer, mentor slash developer. So what is happening over here is whatever I'm writing in the input field, I can basically see it over here. Why is it happening? Because the DOM has been updated, right? And who is updating the DOM? This state is updating the DOM. So whenever a state value is updated, this DOM is also actually updated. So I hope this makes a lot of sense now. So because this element will get re-rendered, why? Because text is the state value. So if you in any element, if you assign a state value, if the state value changes, that element will be re-rendered. In any element, if you assign a state value and the state value changes, then that element will be re-rendered again. Great. Okay. So let me clear this. If I clear this, everything will go away. Okay. I don't want to save it. Okay, but I want to clear it. So if I clear it, everything will go away. Why am I saving it again and again? Okay, great. So this is how I can use the input. I can use it to set the text value. Now over here, see, I've written input value. You can also write event.target.value also. Like you can copy this, not cut it, copy it. Then I can put it directly over here also. It will still works. I just did that. To keep it more cleaner. So hello, I am Prakash. But if you do not want to create unnecessary variables, then you can just do set text event.target.value, which is generally what we actually do. We never create any other variable. Cool. So hello, I am Prakash, passionate developer. Okay, passionate developer. My spellings might be wrong a lot because I'm very bad with spelling since my school days. Still, I have not improved. Okay, so yeah. So this is how I can use input also to set the value. Uh, but 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 uh, but so there basically with input there is something called as a controlled input, and then there is something called as an uncontrolled input also. We'll check what is the meaning of control input and uncontrolled input when we try to make a form. So now basically why am I doing all of these things now? Why are we covering these basics? Because we have to make an application, right? So in tomorrow's class we'll basically make two projects. First will be basically a registration form, other would be a to-do list. Okay, so with the registration form what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use one use state, right? Because there are going to be so with multiple input fields we can have multiple use state, but instead of having multiple use state I'll have only one use state, and I'll use object as my initial value, and I'll basically show you the power of using object as initial value in a use state, where I've seen a lot of people, if there are 10 input fields they use 10 use state, right? So instead of using 10 use state you just use one use state and you use an object, right? So I'll show you what is the power of using an object, so that object as initial value will come in the form, and then we'll see array also, how we can use array, and array as an initial value will come in the to-do list. So we'll do both of them tomorrow. So we'll have maybe 1.5 hour session, so it might go from 9 to 10:15 or 10:30. So yeah, you can stay prepared for tomorrow's session. Okay, that's it from my end for today. I hope you've understood what use state is and how it works under the hood, and tomorrow when we do these two projects it will be clear to the core. Then we'll do use reducer, use effect, and then we'll make the e-commerce application. So yeah, if you have any questions please ask. I am there for a couple of minutes to answer your questions, and then we can wrap it up. So if you have any questions please post in the chat. Okay, I'm reading the chat now. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Okay, since there are no further questions, let me end the stream. So I will see you tomorrow, same time. Bye bye.